Now, Dave Patterson and I recently had a chance to visit Fort Knox, which is in Kentucky. We met with the U.S. Army Recruiting Command to discuss how SMA, we had submitted a white paper to them on how we could help them address their it's a very significant critical shortfall of attracting new recruits. Now, Fort Knox is also the home of the U.S. Armored Cavalry Division and, of course, our nation's depository of gold. Now, while Dave and I were there, I had a chance to visit really an unusual and incredible museum I had not expected to be there. It was on the base, and it was about General George S. Patton, and it was about his leadership. And he had commanded the 2nd Armored Division, and he's really best remembered for his leadership in World War II. Now, he led our troops in the Mediterranean theater and then in the 3rd Army on a really very rapid advanced drive across France, relieved our besieged American troops at the Battle of the Bulge, a very famous battle, and pushed the U.S. Army deep into Nazi Germany.
This is, sorry,
yes.
not to interrupt
no,
you.
That's all right. That's all right. I'm saying that it was really, his leadership in the European theater that really helped lead to an earlier end of World War II.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is a great way to honor those who gave their lives in World War II. And now we're going to show a short video that Ajay took at Fort Knox.
I'm Ajay Patel. And what we want to show you next is actually a video clip that we took when visiting Fort Knox. David Patterson and I had an opportunity to go to Fort Knox and spend some time with the folks here at the U.S. Army Recruiting Command to share some of our ideas about how they can meet their recruiting challenge. Enjoy. Oh, one note, we actually were not allowed to take a video on the base. And when I did try to take a video of where the gold is stored, they actually came, got my phone, and deleted those images. But we did take some video of the George S. Patton, the General George S. Patton Leadership Museum, which is here on the base. And I was able to take some video of the gold bullion depository while driving along the freeway. So enjoy. I am here in the parking lot of the George Patton Leadership Museum. We're right on the edge of Fort Knox. As you can see, there's a fence line over there. And the entrance to the museum is up here. And there's an old structure here. This is a World War II barracks right here on the edge of the parking lot. You can see from the sign that there were thousands of barracks built like this. Wow, check this out. This is what the barracks actually look like. Actually, it looks pretty grim. Here's a timeline of the history of Fort Knox. The gold depository at Fort Knox, it got its first shipment of gold in 1937. It was protected by the 7th Cavalry Brigade. It also actually stored important documents like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. I wonder if that's still the case. They actually opened the Patton Museum, which we're going to go to soon, in 1950 when the Korean War started. And this is in 1980, the M1 Abrams tank was fielded, and Columbia Pictures actually filmed stripes here. And then the last M1 Abrams tank was retired from active duty here at Fort Knox in 1999. Look at that, they actually alternated the head and the feet. So you can see the pillow on the top bunk is in our direction and the pillow on the bottom bunk is in the opposite direction. And I guess the instruction is you aren't supposed to climb on the bunks. That's for us, I think. Where are the foot lockers? Fort Knox is the home of the cavalry units. And there's a little marker here to basically commemorate all the heavy armored cavalry units. And there's the air cavalry units as well. And here's an old tank out in the field. We'll walk up to it to check out what it is. There's a few others in the field too. This one looks like it's the oldest one they have here at the museum. This one was the M3A5 medium tank, a crew of 6, 1942 era. Another one of the older tanks. You can see the tracked wheels here. Pretty impressive, actually. Here's another one. I just can't imagine being one of the crew members inside tanks like this going to war. You can actually see here how the wheels can come off the track. We arrived at the actual entrance to the George Patton Museum. The likeness of the great General George Patton. George Patton felt that to be a successful soldier, you have to really know history. A little bit of the history of George Patton and his family. The history of attending the Virginia Military Institution as part of their primary education. This was the cap that he actually wore while going to BMI. Eventually ended up at much of this leadership museum in General Patton's name is actually about the junior ROTC program in high schools around the country and the ROTC programs in colleges and the entire system of educational institutions that essentially combine both core principles of military service and education, which actually was a key part of the land-grant universities that were created by legislation in the late 1800s. So you can see this map of the ROTC hosted colleges and universities. How few they are in the west of the U.S., how many there are in the East Coast. We're entering another area of the museum. And let's go look at this in detail. This is a saying from General Patton about leadership and character. Character is a person's moral and ethical qualities. It helps a leader do what is right regardless of the circumstances. What is this? It's a saddle, 1859. And this was the saddle used by his grandfather in the Third Battle of Winchester in 1864. And General Patton actually traveled in style on the European front. And apparently this was just how he liked to travel, with a bit of flair and certainly announcing his arrival. I guess pretty colorful. It's actually a Cadillac. I wonder if this is the car that my father-in-law, Harold Stillman, drove General Patton around in the European front. Because I know that he had that duty for a while. Check out the stars on the placard. Pretty interesting. It looks pretty luxurious inside. A little bit less luxurious is this tank. It's actually not a tank, it's the self-propelled howitzer. It's the M7. This is how they landed the ship tanks. There it is in action. More about the self-propelled howitzer. I actually borrowed many of the concepts and components from the M3 and M4 medium tanks. This is actually used considerably in the Korean War, not in World War II. This had a crew of 7. A few of the more unusual items from George Patton, particularly the slingshot, which this was actually his. It's a pistol at the age of 5 that he had, a .22 caliber pump action rifle, and a French sword bayonet from 1870. Now, every kid in that era had a first razor. And this was Patton's first razor, a little bit farther back into General Patton's childhood. And he actually had some stuffed dolls. And he actually lined them up against a wall and would swing his wooden sword at their heads, seeing how many he could actually hit at once. I guess his military training actually started at a very young age. Some of the items from when he was a cadet. both at VMI and then at West Point. See the uniform, this was the West Point uniform. Chevrons, his wallet. Actually an athlete at West Point, and this is his lettered sweater. It actually doesn't say what sport he earned. According to this, he had high hopes of earning his letter in football, but he actually never accomplished that. Instead, it was in track, in the 220-yard hurdles. I guess that's a photo of him. Yes, he actually designed his own cavalry saber. Huh. He went to French cavalry school in France. 1913. Check that out. Now, this is a little known fact. He actually entered the Olympics in 1912 in Sweden, and it was in fencing and the épée. This is a pretty interesting saying from General George Patton. He had a lot of sayings. If you can't get them to salute when they should salute and wear the clothes you tell them to wear, how are you going to get them to die for their country? This is a uniform he actually wore at a pre-World War II conference for armor officers. Actually held here at Fort Knox in 1940. Here are just a selection of some of the personal awards that General George Patton was awarded. Actually awarded to him by the Brits. Quite an honor. And then here, another one from Great Britain for his World War II service. I like that. Look at these medals. And then here's the explanation of each of the medals shown. You see some are from the U.S., but also some from Czechoslovakia, from the French, from the Belgium, Swedish. It's an amazing sash. It was awarded to the general from the Czechoslovakians. Here's some additional crosses that he was awarded. I'm sorry about the reflection, but just trying to get, these are just spectacular. It's like their sashes. This is one from Luxembourg. Again from Luxembourg. This one from Morocco. Last Ike jacket. It's a field jacket that was worn by General Patton. We were just informed we have only another 15 minutes and there's so much more left to this museum. I'm going to do a quick tour. Almost run through the rest of this museum. Wow, here's the Dodge command car. Look at that. Maybe this is the one that my father-in-law Harold Stillman drove him around in. Also, you can see I also had a custom pistol and belt there. Here's the, and that could very well have been Harold Stillman driving him around. Wow, this is quite something. Here's the 48 Star National Color, 1942. Operation Torch, Invasion of North Africa. Ooh, here's the German national flag, 1940. I guess they threw that in there just to show things from the countries we were at war against. There's more there which I missed, but I don't have time to come back to. So we're going to continue to go through this museum in the remaining 10 minutes I have. Willie's dog collar. All right, English Bull Terrier was his best friend named William. I guess William the Conqueror, but more affectionately known as Willie. Never knew that. Look at that English Bull Terrier, quite a dog. And that was actually one of the dogs that the ascendants from which French Bulldogs came from. Yay, buddy. about 911. General Westmoreland in Vietnam. So it really is about leadership in the military, particularly the Army over the years. Here's the Huey. Yeah, really widely used helicopter. Back through the museum now. Until my next visit to Fort Knox, which I hope will be soon. We are beginning to have conversations with recruiting command that's based here at Fort Knox about some potential really important work that we can do to help them meet their recruiting challenges. We'll finish with the last images of his ceremonial car, the Caddy. Whoa, I love these. Isn't that something? Wow, look at all that painstaking detail. It's a finishing shot of the George Patton Museum, the General George Patton Museum. Exit the museum grounds. There's actually an old graveyard here. You can see they replaced the tombstones. But you look towards the back, you can see it's actually, the graveyard's pretty extensive. You peek through the trees. We really don't know who's buried here, but we'll take a quick look at the sign before they kick me out. It's for the U.S. Cavalry, 1861 to 1961. 6th Armored Cavalry. In case I didn't explain to our audience, Fort Knox is actually the home of the Armored Division for the Army. We are back. I could have spent easily an entire day there, and I made the mistake of arriving, shortly before they were going to close. Well, yes. Anything in that museum, Lexi, and welcome, Lexi. It's great to have you here on this side of the camera. Anything in that museum tour that intrigued you?
My favorite part was definitely Willie, General George Patton's dog, and Buddy, and that similarity there. I loved that so much.
I kind of did too. I cracked a big smile when I saw that.
Yes.
He had an English bulldog as kind of his pet there during the war.
Indeed. All right, so speaking of the topic and going to that amazing museum, I wanted to know General Patton made a huge contribution to the U.S. Army's culture of leadership, and Patton was known for his exceptional leadership skills. And AJ, what were some of his key aspects of his leadership?
Well, he obviously had he was a big character, right? And he had a really strong presence and charisma that inspired the troops. He believed in leading by example, and that was really his thing. And he was at the front lines, right? Now, he was also very decisive. He made quick and effective decisions on the battlefield. He believed that a wrong decision made quickly was often better than a perfect decision made later. And in many ways, Jacques and I run SMA in similar ways.
Yes, amazing. And also, wasn't he a controversial figure due to some of his actions and statements?
Yes, I had actually heard stories from my father-in-law who served in both the African and the European theaters, and actually had an opportunity to drive General Patton around in the European theater for a short while. And his temper was notorious. And he was known for using very strong language, which back then you could use. And he made impulsive decisions. So
do you have any books or resources that you recommend for learning more about General Patton's life and military career?
Yeah, I do. First of all, go to Kentucky, because there's nothing like actually being in that museum. But also, probably the thing I would really suggest is his memoir. It's War as I Knew It by General Patton. And the book's a collection of his wartime diary. He kept meticulous diaries. And there were actually examples of that at the museum. And also just reflections. It's really a first-hand account of his experiences. And he kept his diary. It was a lifelong thing. And gives us insights into his thinking on strategy, leadership, the challenges he faced, particularly during World War II. Indeed. So it was really an incredible opportunity to do that. I'm glad I had a chance to do it. I'm glad I was able to share this with everybody in the audience today.
Well, thank you for taking that video, and I'm sure everyone's happy that the nation's gold is safe at Fort Knox.
Indeed, even safe from anyone taking photos. So.